On a cold morning in Boston, the sound of the bell announced the start of classes. Among the students, 16-year-old Amina Rahman adjusted her light blue hijab over her hair with the care of someone carrying a symbol of faith. Teacher Karen Miller watched from her desk and with a half-smile asked in a mocking tone, "You don't get tired of wearing that? No one here is tied to those traditions anymore." Some students laughed, others exchanged silent glances. Amina lowered her eyes, her face burning with shame, but her voice didn't shake as she replied, "Faith isn't fashion, ma'am." The room fell silent. And in that moment, without anyone noticing, a story began, one that the next day would transform the whole school. Stay with me, because Allah always lifts those who are humiliated for holding on to what is sacred. Before we continue, make sure you're already subscribed and tell us in the comments which city you're watching from. Amina Rahman was 16 and carried in her gaze the calm of someone who had learned early to balance two worlds. The daughter of Pakistani immigrants, she was born in the United States but grew up listening to the sound of the Adhan and English mixed with Urdu at home. Her father, a bus driver, and her mother, a seamstress, always told her, "Never lower your veil, my daughter, it is your dignity." Amina was an excellent student, high grades, exemplary behavior, but Boston's public school environment wasn't easy. Some classmates called her the girl with the scarf. Others asked whether her father forced her to dress that way. She smiled patiently and always gave the same answer, "I wear it because I love what it represents." Her blue hijab was more than fabric. It was a memory of her grandmother, who had sewn it by hand before Amina moved to the United States. "When you wear it, remember who you are," the elderly woman had said, and Amina remembered, in every prayer, in every sideways glance, in every forced silence in the classroom. That week, the school was organizing a multicultural fair, and Amina had signed up to represent Pakistan. She was preparing a small display with photos, Quranic verses, and scarves of different colors, explaining the value of modesty in Islam. She was excited, but anxious. She feared judgment. While printing the last images in the library, a classmate commented in an ironic tone, "Are you going to give a lecture on how to hide your hair?" Amina simply responded with a calm smile, "No, on how respect can be beautiful too." She didn't know it yet, but destiny was about to use that very veil, the symbol so many despised, to teach the entire school a lesson. Monday afternoon seemed like any other at Jefferson High School in Boston. The sound of footsteps in the halls, the hum of the air, and the smell of fresh paint blended with the rustling of turning pages. In room 204, teacher Karen Miller paced back and forth, grading tests in a rush, her expression tired. She was known for her strict manner and her dislike of any distraction during class. Amina sat in the last row, her small pocket Quran resting discreetly on her notebook. She wasn't reading out of rebellion, she was reading because she found peace in those words. While waiting for the bell to signal the next period, she moved her lips softly, reciting verses about patience and faith. Karen lifted her eyes, irritated by the faint whisper. "Miss Rahman," she called out sharply, "put that book away, please. This is biology class, not religious studies." The room went still. Students turned toward her, some curious, others uneasy. Amina hesitated, her heart racing. She closed the Quran gently and replied in a thin voice, "Yes, ma'am." The teacher crossed her arms. "And since we're talking about that, may I ask you something?" Before the girl could answer, she continued with a smirk, "Why hide your hair? You're so pretty. No woman should be ashamed of being seen." The comment prompted giggles from the front rows. Amina felt her face burn but kept her gaze lowered. Her hands gripped the blue veil tightly, as if the fabric were her shield. Her heartbeat pounded so loudly, she barely heard a classmate try to change the subject. "Teacher, did you see the grade for the experiment?" Karen ignored her. "You don't have to take things so seriously, Miss Ramon. No one here will judge you if you decide to take that off someday." Amina lifted her head for the first time. Her eyes were misty, but steady. "It's not the world that covers me, teacher. It's Allah." The sentence fell like a stone into the silence. Karen frowned, unsure how to respond. Some students looked away, others nodded subtly, not in disapproval, but in respect. The bell finally rang, ending the tension. Amina put away her Quran, stood up, and walked to the door as the teacher remained still, staring at the blue veil glowing under the window light. Outside, The hallway buzzed with whispers. "Did you hear what she said?" they murmured. Within minutes, the incident had spread through the school's message groups. No one imagined, however, that the moment born from public humiliation would become the beginning of a change that would touch the entire community. The next day, the atmosphere at school felt different. The hallways seemed quieter, and the looks were more curious than ever. During the break, Amina walked with the book pressed to her chest when she noticed phones pointed at her. The video had been circulating online since dawn. Recorded by a classmate, it showed the exact moment teacher Karen Miller mocked the hijab. In less than 12 hours, it had surpassed 100,000 views. The comments were divided between support and outrage. Freedom of expression, intolerance disguised as education. This girl has more dignity than many adults. In the teacher's lounge, Karen tried convincing herself it was just a misunderstanding. It was a comment taken out of context. "They're exaggerating." But the coordinator interrupted her, his expression stern. "It's out of our hands. The administration will investigate." The news spread through the halls like wildfire. Some students avoided looking at Amina. Others approached to offer shy support. "You were very brave yesterday," she answered with a fragile smile. It wasn't bravery, it was faith. That night, at home, the young girl knelt on her prayer rug. The room was dark, lit only by the soft glow of the lamp. Tears slid down her face in silence as she whispered, "Ya, give me strength not to repay shame with shame. Let my silence speak louder than pride." While Amina prayed, on the other side of the city, Karen sat on her couch, her face illuminated by her phone screen. The video had already been shared by influencers and civil rights pages. Her name was among the most talked about topics that morning. Notifications kept popping up, messages of disapproval, calls from the school, journalists asking for statements. Regret began to weigh on her, but pride still spoke louder. She turned off the phone, trying to forget it. But the silence in the house seemed to echo her own words spoken in class. No woman needs to be ashamed of being seen. Now, she was the one who wished she could disappear. The school officially announced a disciplinary investigation, and the entire city was talking about the case. But among the comments, the videos, and the tension, something invisible had already begun to move, something no algorithm could predict. Because when injustice tries to spread, Allah prepares the response in a way everyone can see, without the need for a single word. Morning came with a sky covered by thin clouds and a cold wind sweeping across the school courtyard. Amina walked slowly, her blue veil neatly tucked under her coat, trying to ignore the looks and whispers. Her footsteps echoed louder than usual, as if the very ground were waiting for something. When she reached the classroom door, she hesitated for a moment. She took a deep breath, adjusted her hijab, and pushed the handle. What she saw made time stop. 10 girls were wearing hijabs, scarves in vivid colors: pink, white, lilac, green, gold. None of them were Muslim. And yet each one carried in her eyes the same calm of someone who understands the weight of a gesture. Amina froze, her heart racing. One of the girls, Emily, stood up and smiled. "Today, we're with you." A murmur moved through the room. The boys, not understanding, looked around. Karen walked in seconds later, a stack of tests in her hands, and froze at the sight. The colorful scarves reflected the light from the window like a small aurora inside the classroom. There was no laughter, no teasing, only silence, the kind that weighs more than any word. Karen blinked a few times, confused. "What's going on here?" Emily answered with a steady voice. "Nothing wrong, ma'am. We just learned from what we saw yesterday." The teacher swallowed hard. She looked at Amina, who now rose slowly, her eyes filled with. She didn't speak, she simply placed her hands over her chest in a gesture of silent gratitude. Outside, a group of students watched through the window. Soon, more girls began to appear, some improvising scarves with shawls, scarves, even hair ribbons. The entire hallway began to fill with color, and the scene spread like the reflection of something greater. During the break, phones started recording again, but this time for another reason. Social media flooded with videos showing the students' spontaneous solidarity. Comments poured in by the thousands. "This is how you fight prejudice with dignity. Allah honors those who keep a pure heart." Karen, sitting at her desk, watched everything in silence. Inside, something was shifting, a discomfort that didn't come from anger, but from conscience. The words she had spoken the day before echoed within her, now heavy with regret. During lunch, the vice principal called her for a private conversation. "Did you see what's happening?" Karen nodded, her voice choked. "I saw, and I don't know if I deserve to witness it." The news spread across the city. In just a few hours, the local press began covering the movement started by the girls. Newspapers called it the Veil March, but inside the school, far from the cameras, the truth was simpler. It wasn't a protest, it was compassion. Amina, sitting in the back, watched everything with a shy smile. She knew none of those girls fully understood the meaning of the hijab, but she felt that Allah had used their gesture to show something much greater. That faith can be mocked for a moment, but never humiliated entirely. The Jefferson High School auditorium was full. Chairs arranged in rows, students, teachers, and staff seated in tense silence. The sound of the projector filled the air as the principal, Mr. Anderson, stepped onto the stage and said in a firm voice, "Today we're not here to discuss religion. We're here to talk about respect." The lights dimmed, and the video began to play. On the screen they saw the exact moment Karen Miller, arms crossed, mocked Amina's hijab. The audio echoed through the room. "Why hide your hair? No woman needs to be ashamed of being seen." A murmur ran through the auditorium. Some students lowered their heads, others frowned, uncomfortable. The next image showed Amina in silence, holding back tears, while the laughter in the background became unbearable. When the video ended, the principal paused and looked at the audience. This school teaches respect before any subject, and when a student is humiliated for her faith, all of us have failed. Karen stood up nervously, her face pale in the projector's light. "I didn't mean to offend. It was a joke. I didn't realize she would take it seriously." The principal folded his arms. But before he could respond, a voice rose from the audience, firm, indignant. It was Emily, one of the girls who had worn a hijab the day before. "It's not a joke, man. It's faith." Other voices followed. "It's part of who she is. She never asked to be an example. You put her in that place." The silence that followed was heavy. Karen tried to speak, but no words came out. Her eyes filled with tears, and she simply sat down, her hands trembling in her lap. Amina, in the front row, kept her head down. Her fingers slid slowly over the beads of the tasbih she kept hidden in her pocket. She whispered in a barely audible voice, "Hasbunallahu wa ni'mal wakeel. Allah is sufficient for us, and He is the best protector." The principal resumed speaking. "None of us is immune to making mistakes, but when a mistake wounds someone's faith, it becomes a public lesson." He took a deep breath. "Miss Miller will be suspended until the disciplinary process is complete, and this school will begin including intercultural education in its annual program." The announcement stirred mixed reactions. Some applauded, others remained silent, but everyone felt the same undeniable weight of justice, as if something invisible had been restored. Outside the auditorium, journalists waited. The story had already outgrown the walls of the school. National news outlets were publishing headlines such as, "Teacher suspended after ridiculing Muslim students. Students respond with solidarity." Meanwhile, Amina left the building quietly, holding her books against her chest. The cold afternoon wind brushed the fabric of her hijab, and she took a deep breath, feeling relief mixed with sadness. She did not wish for the teacher's downfall only. That respect would rise where mockery once stood. Hours later, at home, she sat down to pray. The room was silent, the evening light bathing the walls in golden tones. With a calm heart, she recited, "O Allah, you see me when no one else does. You know when I am hurt and when I choose to forgive." That same night, Karen received a flood of messages. Among the criticism, there were also pleas for reflection. But one email caught her attention, sent by an anonymous student. It read, "You taught me biology, but it was Amina who taught me humanity." Karen reread the sentence over and over until tears fell onto the keyboard. For the first time, she understood the true weight of her words, the depth of the faith she had tried to diminish the case. Now public, had left a deep mark on the school community. But without knowing it, the shared pain was about to become something much greater, sign of reconciliation and change. The night dragged on, heavy and long. Karen tossed in bed, unable to shake the image of Amina Essi said any Ghazi. That gaze which returned neither hatred nor shame, only calm. The words she had spoken in front of everyone echoed like something bitter. No woman needs to be ashamed of being seen. Now, She was the one who didn't want to be seen. Around 5 in the morning, with the sky still gray, she got up and went to the mirror. The dark circles under her eyes marked her face, and her eyes carried the weight of guilt. On the corner of her desk, she saw something forgotten, a white scarf she had received from an old Muslim colleague years earlier and had never worn. Instinctively, she picked up the fabric. It was soft, light, and carried a faint scent of jasmine. She stood there for a few minutes, just looking at it, until she began to cry without knowing exactly why. "Yesterday, I taught science and forgot humanity," she whispered to herself. At sunrise, the sun lit the courtyard, damp from the drizzle. Karen arrived early, long before the first bell. She walked through the empty hallways, feeling her heartbeat quicken. She carried the white scarf folded in her hands. When she entered the classroom, students began finding their seat. The chatter stopped when she placed her books on the desk, took a deep breath, and faced the class. Amina was there, sitting in the third row, quiet, unaware of what was about to happen. Karen adjusted the microphone and spoke with a trembling voice. "Before we begin today's lesson, I need to say something." The students exchanged glances. She paused, then continued. "Yesterday, I humiliated someone out of ignorance. I spoke about something I didn't understand and hurt someone who was only showing her faith. Today, I want to learn from her." Total silence. With trembling hands, she unfolded the white scarf and placed it over her head. No sound came from the class, only held breaths. Karen adjusted the fabric carefully, imitating the gestures she had seen Amina do so many times. "This scarf doesn't make me Muslim," she said, "but it reminds me that a woman's dignity isn't in showing herself, it's in respecting herself and respecting others." Some students began to cry. Others lifted their phones discreetly, recording the moment. The video would spread later, but there, in that moment, time felt suspended. Amina brought her hand to her face, trying to hold back tears. Her heart was beating so fast she could barely breathe. She stood up and, still emotional, replied softly, "Thank you, teacher." Because sincere remorse is also a form of courage. Karen smiled as tears rolled freely down her cheek. The entire class stood in respect. There were no applause or cheers, only that kind of silence. In the back of the room, Emily whispered to a friend, "It feels like Allah touched her heart." And the friend replied, "Maybe the scarf she's wearing today is the answer to Amina's prayer yesterday." The principal, passing by the hallway, stopped at the door and watched the scene for a few seconds. Later, she would tell other teachers, "I've never seen a classroom so quiet. It felt like the air itself was kneeling." That day, no lesson was taught. Karen spent the time talking with the students about respect, faith, and empathy. She spoke little, listened much. And at the end of the class, she handed the scarf to Amina. "Keep it. It taught me more than all my degrees." Amina held the fabric gently and replied, "No, ma'am, keep it. It's part of your story now." As she left the room, Karen looked out the window and saw dozens of students crossing the courtyard, many still wearing colorful hijab. She smiled, breathing deeply. She felt light, as if she had finally learned the lesson no book could teach, that Allah honors those who endure humiliation with patience and transforms even mistakes into repentance that illuminates. The hallway was quiet after the final bell. Students left in groups, talking about what they had witnessed. Some were still wiping tears, others whispering words of admiration. Karen remained in the classroom, sitting, the scarf still on the desk, as if she didn't quite know what to do with the tour, with the weight in her heart. Minutes later, Amina appeared at the door, shy. She carried the same gentle smile as always, the same calm expression the teacher could not face without feeling ashamed. Karen stood slowly and took a few steps toward the girl. Her voice came out shaky, but sincere. "Amina, I don't deserve forgiveness, but I need to ask for it. For what I said, for what I caused, and for turning your faith into a spectacle." The young girl took a deep breath before answering. "Teacher, Allah teaches that whoever repents sincerely is forgiven. Forgiveness isn't earned, it is mercy." The words fell softly but firmly, spoken by someone who truly understood their meaning. Karen lowered her eyes and nodded, emotional. "I wanted to teach about the world, and discovered I knew very little about humanity." Without thinking, Amina stepped forward and embraced her. It was a silent, lingering hug filled with relief, the kind of gesture that erases borders, religions, and names, and leaves only what is human. At that moment, a student newspaper photographer walking down the hallway stopped when he saw the scene. Instinctively, he raised his camera and captured the exact moment. The two women in an embrace, one with a blue hijab, the other with tears on her face. The photo would be published the next day with the caption, "When remorse meets forgiveness." Within hours, the image spread across social media. Local news outlets called it the portrait of reconciliation. TV programs, journalists, and even religious leaders began commenting on the episode. What had once been remembered as a case of intolerance had now transformed into a public lesson on empathy and faith. Meanwhile, Amina and Karen tried to process the whirlwind their lives had become. In the teacher's lounge, colleagues approached the instructor. "I saw the photo. It was beautiful, Karen. Courage like that changes more than any lecture." She smiled humbly. The courage was hers, not mine. In the courtyard, groups of students began discussing the meaning of the hijab. Some were researching its origins. Others approached Amina to listen to her explanations. She spoke patiently, without pride, always with the same calm tone. The veil isn't a barrier. It's a reminder that true beauty lies in obeying Allah, even when the world mocks it. In the afternoon, the principal called both of them into his office. On the desk lay a printed copy of the photograph that was circulating nationwide. "You have no idea the impact this has caused," he said, emotional. This image was shown at an educational conference in less than 24 hours. "People are using your example as a model of reconciliation." Karen smiled shyly and replied, "If this story inspires someone to think before speaking, the pain was worth it." Amina nodded and calmly added, "And if it helps someone realize that forgiveness is stronger than humiliation, then Allah has already accepted its purpose." Outside, the wind blew gently, lifting leaves across the courtyard. The sky, painted in golden tones, reflected on the school windows, as if even nature shared the sense of relief. At the end of the day, the two walked together toward the gate. Karen carried the white scarf over her shoulder, and Amina helped adjust it against the wind. It was a simple gesture, but full of meaning, as if every fold of the fabric stitched back the respect that prejudice had torn apart. As they said goodbye, Karen said, "You changed the way I teach." And Amina replied, with a smile, "And you taught me that even someone who makes a mistake can become a sign from Allah when they choose true repentance." That afternoon, neither of them knew it, but that photograph would go on to inspire schools, mosques, and entire communities, proving a quiet truth. Those who defend their faith with dignity end up teaching even the ones who tried to wound them. The Friday morning sunrise brought something different to Jefferson High School. The hallways, usually cold and rushed, were filled with a new kind of energy. Colorful banners hung on the walls with phrases like "Empathy is strength and respect is the language of all people." The principal had announced the event earlier in the week, but no one imagined how big it would become. They called it Respect Day. And when the bell rang, the school gym was already packed. Students from every class, teachers, and even some parents filled the bleachers. But the most striking sight was the visual spectacle. Hundreds of students wore scarves, turbans, and bands, each one representing a culture, a belief, a story. There were floral fabrics, silk veils, Hindu symbol bandanas, Jewish shawls, hijabs, in every color of the rainbow. The entire gym looked like a sea of faith and diversity. The microphone was handed to Karen. She walked to the center of the stage with slow steps, her trembling hands holding a small note card. For a moment, the murmurs stopped. Everyone waited for her to speak. She took a deep breath and began. "A week ago, I made the gravest mistake an educator can make. I spoke before understanding. I judged before knowing. And I humiliated a student who only wanted to express her faith." Her voice faltered for a second, but she continued firmly. "Today, I've learned that respect begins when we open our eyes to what we don't understand. When we stop trying to be right and begin to listen." The audience remained in absolute silence. Only the sound of the microphone echoed through the gym. She continued, "I want to thank Amina, who responded to my arrogance with kindness. She taught me that true education happens when the heart learns before the mind." Her words resonated deeply. Some students cried, others held hands with the people beside them. The principal, visibly moved, wiped her tears discreetly. Then suddenly every student stood up. The applause began softly and grew until it became overwhelming. It was more than applause, it was forgiveness, unity, transformation. Karen took a deep breath and looked at the crowd with tear-filled eyes. In the middle of the audience, she found Amina Essisedeni, Fassi seated among friends. The young girl did not clap. She simply smiled gently, her hands raised discreetly in supplication. Alhamdulillah, she murmured softly, her lips barely moving. Praise be to Allah. A light breeze moving through the open windows made some of the scarves sway like flags of peace. The midday sun shone through the gaps in the ceiling and reflected off the vibrant colors, creating a silent display of beauty and harmony. When the applause faded, Karen stepped off the stage, and the principal called Amina forward. Surprised, she stood up hesitantly and walked to the microphone. She said only one sentence: "Faith doesn't need defense, only behavior that honors it." The gym rose to its feet once again. This time, the applause was for both of them, the teacher who learned and the student who taught without raising her voice. As the event came to an end, a local journalist captured the moment the two embraced. This image, published a few hours later, appeared as a headline on several news sites with a simple caption: "Respect can begin with a mistake, as long as it ends with humility." That day, everyone left the school feeling they had witnessed something that does not repeat itself. It wasn't just an event. It was the moment when a classroom marked by humiliation became a stage for mercy, and a veil, once the target of laughter, became a symbol of light. In a few days, the story crossed far beyond school walls. Newsrooms, websites, and TV channels broadcast the image of the teacher and student embracing. The most shared headline read, "From humiliation to example. Teacher learns about faith from her own student." Messages of support began arriving from several countries. Muslim women from London, Cairo, and Jakarta sent videos thanking Amina for her courage. Even non-Muslim communities shared this story, highlighting the universal value of respect. Other American schools were inspired and created Hijab Day, a day when any student could wear the veil to understand its spiritual meaning. The idea spread quickly, becoming a national movement. Karen, transformed by the experience, took on a new role within the institution. She began coordinating projects on religious freedom, empathy, and intercultural coexistence. Her talks started simply a teacher speaking about a mistake and what it had taught her, but over Chimi they became full conferences. She would say in a calm voice, "Teaching is not shaping others in our own image, but learning to see the humanity in those who are different." Meanwhile, Amina kept her quiet routine. She avoided the spotlight, declined invitations from TV shows, but agreed to speak when she knew her words could inspire other young Muslim women. In a short interview, her response captured what millions had felt. "Faith doesn't need to shout. Allah speaks for those who remain steadfast." Those words spread as widely as the original video. They were printed on school bulletin boards, written on event posters, and shared in thousands of posts under the hashtag faith that teach. The school principal once said during a staff meeting, "I've never seen a mistake create so much learning." The teacher's remorse and the student's patience changed our entire community. Karen and Amina continued studying together, exchanging books, stories, and experiences. What began as a conflict became a friendship built on humility and gratitude. One day, at the end of a lecture, Karen looked at the audience and concluded, "Sometimes Allah allows shame to become a mirror. That's how I learned to see the beauty that prejudice had kept me from seeing." The auditorium rose in applause, and as flashes captured the moment, Amina, seated among the guests, lowered her head and thanked in silence, certain that the lesson had fulfilled its purpose, showing that Allah honors those who endure with patience and turns even offense into light. Months had passed since the incident that had changed the school's routine. The hallways, once filled with whispers and cruel laughter, now displayed posters about empathy, respect, and faith. Respect Day had become a monthly tradition. Each class chose a culture to celebrate, and everyone participated with genuine enthusiasm. The relationship between Karen and Amina blossomed into something unexpected, a friendship built on humility and admiration. The teacher, who once saw the hijab as a symbol of distance, now viewed it as an expression of spiritual strength and beauty. She began visiting the local mosque at Amina's invitation, not out of academic curiosity, but to understand what she had felt when the students' forgiveness touched her. During her first visits, she sat quietly in the back, watching the women pray side by side, moving in perfect harmony. Once, she confided to the principal, "I thought their silence was empty. Now I realize it's peace." Meanwhile, Amina matured with serenity. The painful experience had made her an example for other young Muslim women who faced discrimination. The school offered her space to lead a support and interfaith dialogue group. There, girls from different beliefs discussed identity, faith, and belonging. Amina guided the conversations with wisdom, always reminding them, the hijab is not a barrier. It's a reminder of who I am when the world tries to change. The school environment had changed entirely. Teachers adapted their lessons to include discussions about cultural plurality, and even the uniform code was revised to respect religious practices. The changes did not come from mandates, but from a new collective understanding. Diversity does not divide it. In the central courtyard, a new mural was unveiled during the end of semester ceremony. The project involved students of all ages and religions, with vibrant paint and bold strokes. They wrote the phrase Amina had chosen, "Modesty is light, and every light deserves to be." The mural became a symbol of the school's new chapter. Visitors took photos. Teachers used it as an example in ethics and art classes, and students pointed to it proudly when new classmates arrived. Karen passed by it every morning before entering her classroom. She always paused for a few seconds, gently touched the painted edge of the wall, and murmured, "May this light never fade." On Fridays, it became common to see her walking to the mosque beside Amina. She did not participate in the prayers, but waited outside in the courtyard, watching the peaceful movement of the worshippers. When the student came out, the two talked about books, verses, and stories of faith. Karen said each meeting was a lesson, and Amina, with humility, replied, "The best teacher is life itself." When we let pride leave the room, soon the city began to notice the transformation. Other schools sent teachers to learn about the project and apply the same model of dialogue and respect. What had begun as a moment of embarrassment now served as a reference for the entire district. The old classroom where everything had started received a symbolic plaque here. A mistake became learning, and respect became routine. And so, what had once brought tears became a source of pride. At Jefferson High School, no one laughed at the veil anymore, because everyone had learned that every fabric, every belief, and every gesture of faith can carry a glow, and that when the light is true, even those who once feared it learn to walk with it. The semester came to an end. The school, now filled with colorful posters and genuine smiles, carried an atmosphere of harmony hard to imagine months earlier. On that last day, before the students left the classroom, Karen approached Amina holding a small box wrapped with a white ribbon. She handed it to her with a serene expression. "This is a thank you, not from a teacher to a student, but from someone who learned from your patience." Amina slowly opened the package. Inside, there was a blue scarf, the same shade as the one she wore the day she was humiliated. The gesture left her speechless. The two exchanged a long look, and Karen added, emotional, "You taught me what books could not. Respect is not taught, it is witnessed." Amina held the gift to her chest, her eyes filled with tears. With a gentle voice she replied, "Allah guides even the hearts that once seemed far away." The bell rang, signaling the end of classes. Students began to leave, laughing and saying goodbye as the evening light streamed through the windows. In the hallway, a light breeze blew, making Amina's new scarf sway softly, as if the sky itself acknowledged the weight of the lesson learned. Karen watched as the young girl walked away. For a moment, everything felt silent, only the sound of fabric brushing the air. A simple reminder that faith, when firm, doesn't need to raise its voice to be. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and watch the next video, because Allah always honors those who remain faithful, even when the world tries to shame them and turns every tear into a testimony of light.